Good evening, it's Captain Emotionless back again. Today is a special day. It's the day I start my most ambitious video essay to date. The first three were a blast to make, but they just didn't hold the same importance for me that Last of Us does. But I sit here wondering how I can say what hasn't already been said. Well, I can at least give it a try. So, first let me issue a clear verbal spoiler warning. Play these masterpieces first, if you're worried about spoilers, because I promise you, they are worth it. But now, without any further ado, we gotta go back in time. All the way back to the birth of the 2010s. Ooh, baby, what a time to be alive. 2013. With momentous games like BioShock Infinite, Rayman Legends, and GTA 5, a game that's still getting new versions 8 years later, surely your dear friend Captain Emotionless was all in on the gamer lifestyle. Well, not exactly. Here's me. Yep, that's 2013 me. I'd just completed my 5th all-time read-through of the Harry Potter series. I'd gotten through the introduction of a disease to my 9-year-old body, and I'd also read Hunger Games and Percy Jackson and countless other novels, but video games weren't my thing. Why? Well, it wasn't until much later that I finally got my introduction into the world I practically live in now. All thanks to my mother. She had a deep aversion to video games when I was young. 2013 me would marvel at the stories I could tell him. But at the very same time I was finishing 3rd grade, a studio already famous and world-renowned for their past work released a game that was a masterpiece of its era. Why? Why was this Naughty Dog title a killer game of the decade? Well, what was The Last of Us? In simple terms, it's just a zombie game. Not like there were many of those in 2013. Okay, so maybe its genre didn't exactly stand out, but there's gotta be some kind of secret sauce. IGN doesn't hand out 10s for nothing, surely. Okay, maybe they're a little loose with the rules, but their track record doesn't matter because sometimes, rarely, they get it 100% right. Why is it 100% right in this case? Well, let me tell you. If a studio puts out AAA title after AAA title, then a certain amount of quality is typically expected of them. With Uncharted 1, 2, and 3, Naughty Dog didn't exactly, well, revolutionize the wheel with each new title. The wheel they had made with Uncharted 1 was already pretty damn good. I mean, can you do much better than a bullet being stopped by the journal in someone's front breast pocket and it saves their life? Or running at a train, shooting at a helicopter as the train explodes behind you? I mean, come on. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's just say, after making awesome, jaw-dropping experiences in quick succession, there was a bit of dismay as to where to take the company next. In comes Neil Druckmann. After spending almost half a decade writing, reviewing, editing, and scripting, he thinks he might have struck gold. He pitches the original concept to the studio executives at Sony, and the first ever story idea was useless. It was a problematic title called Mankind about a virus that could only affect women. It was sexist and misogynistic, and it quickly got overturned. But success is often born of failure, and just as the phoenix rises from the ashes, Neil, with an idea that he had been formulating since university, burst forth with creative vision. After much reworking and editing, the final pitch involved betrayal, Tess as the main villain, and a breathtaking moment at the end where Ellie commits murder for the first time. And this was the way the story sat for the next year and a half. I'm not saying I don't like this idea, but I hate this idea. The final product is the ideal version of the game. Luckily, after a year and a half, it didn't take long for the story to be reworked. It came to include various story beats that de-emphasized the need for a main villain. Rather, the story would play out involving the hardship along the road to success, metaphorically and literally, as Ellie and Joel traversed across the nation. As they evolved, they would follow the rough path of a coming-of-age story. Ellie learning how to survive in the post-apocalyptic wasteland, and Joel revitalizing his love for humanity. It's rare that a story so quickly leaps to popularity. Not to say that The Last of Us doesn't deserve it, but it's just often surprising when a game comes out and immediately rakes in 10s across the board. Needless to say, this game kicked the ass of pretty much every other game that came out in 2013. In fact, it walked away with the most laurels of any game ever, until it was beaten by The Witcher 3 in 2015. Then the franchise promptly retook the record with The Last of Us Part 2 in 2020. So when was I first introduced to it? Because it certainly wasn't back in 2013 when my mom barely let me touch a copy of Assassin's Creed, let alone play a game about shooting human beings and running from infected zombies. Well, you know something shocking? The first time I played the game that I now consider to be one of my favorite games of all time was February of 2020. I know it sounds silly, but it's true. The game instantly wormed its way right into my heart, solely for its heart-wrenching moments and beautiful character development. And on release, critics agreed. Not only did they love the hide-and-seek gameplay, but they were completely enamored with the emotional depth and tear-jerking moments. But expectations for the game amongst the general public were low. After 3 epic Pirates of the Caribbean, Indiana Jones-esque, badass movie video games in a row, the prospect of a more subdued and character-driven, emotional journey certainly wasn't what the public was jonesing for. Back when God of War and Assassin's Creed were at their peaks, people wanted nothing but bloodlust, murder, and Doom-esque ripping and tearing. But Naughty Dog was determined to push through these boundaries. So just like them, let's actually push ahead and start in on the actual damn game. Setting the pace for a game is so necessary that often developers delay the title card so they can build up their intro. But often, keeping things concise is even more important. Accuracy and consistency are what make a game, and these characteristics are just as needed in the intro. We begin in a cutscene, with the camera pointed towards Sarah. Building relationships is exactly what this game is about. Joel and Ellie, Ellie and Tess, Joel and Tommy, and especially the player and the characters. Since this game strives for that beautiful empathic connection that every game desires, Naughty Dog wants to inspire love for these characters immediately. Joel's friends are your friends. The people he loves are the people you love. So Sarah, the first character on screen, is our first connection. The person we begin to reside in. Our eyes occupy her world, and while it is a third-person narrative, we see the world alongside her. She and Joel connect on an intricate and intimate level. They have a pre-established love for each other that we buy into because it's written so naturally. They jest and are playful, but also caring and connected. The watch, the card, the birthday wishes, and the caring they share with each other is how the player gains an insight into Joel's world and his relationships. Having you begin the game as Sarah is just ingenious. You build empathy and are scared as her world keeps changing. And they don't start with killing zombies or hacking your way through the city. They begin with a scared little kid who just wants to know where her dad is. And as the player wanders the house, the anticipation for the future builds. The moment of release is timed perfectly with the breaking point of fear. Pushing through the door allows us to find Joel, disheveled and energized, clearly scared and rattled by whatever he had just seen. He pulls out a gun and everything goes wrong. It's your neighbor. That's the first infected he kills. Another important choice that hinges on the concept of relationships. Killing a zombie is scary. Killing someone you know is so much worse. Joel rushes Sarah to the car and Tommy, Joel's brother, hops in with them. They drive off, and along the way they pass a family in need of help. But Joel passes them by. It's genius characterization. He chooses his family over helping others because even now, he is selfish and closed off from the world. Choices define the characters in this series. They live, they laugh, they cry. The choice of leaving that family on the road shows us who Joel is. Having watched the intro of this game through Sarah's eyes, our empathy for her is amplified. Her choices are our choices, and so, when her final breath is drawn, when her body goes limp, and Joel weeps holding her broken figure, I couldn't help but cry. His pleading words for her to live. This is how it's done, people. You build connections with a character so that inevitably, when the player loses them, it cuts like a knife to the heart. The intro plays. A world broken by a virus, but more importantly, a father broken by the loss of his daughter. A connection of love shattered. 20 years later, a broken man whose shattered pieces have never reformed. Tess enters, and a relationship of mutual care is immediately established. In this new world, 20 years having passed, we as the viewer latch on to every friendly character we come across. With next to no information, we feel alienated from this world, which of course furthers our connection with Joel. I do believe at this point Naughty Dog was faced with a difficult dilemma. The issue of how to connect the player to their daughter, Ellie. I am not a fan of the boring plot device, Robert. He's not a character, and he wasn't written to be interesting. He's just an activation point to join Marlene with Joel and Tess and lead them to their true mission, escorting Ellie to the research lab. It's not the choice I would have made, but making the new mission forced is at least a great way of showing Tess as Joel's foil. She's just as cynical as him, and just as deadly, but she still holds hope for the future. It's a common and recurring theme in emotional media, that of a character who improves based on the characters around them. Joel is improved first by Tess, then by Ellie, and love between the characters grows in that improvement. Loss is scattered over this world, over and over again. It's a vital theme to take away from this franchise. That losing someone can lead people to do horrible things. Tess's death is certainly a turning point for the narrative, a jumping off point for Joel, where he begins to take a more personal investment in Ellie, and the quest to take her to the Fireflies. A lot of depressing and painful things happen in this game, but the underlying importance of all of them is that these things create a cycle. The cycle of violence, which has positive and negative effects, though most often the latter. And this cycle is one that Ellie and Joel struggle with and both inevitably learn from. Often, writers will create characters that reflect an aspect of the main hero, to show what they could become, or something they have to fix. Bill is Joel's mirror. He is the second character besides Joel to present the effects of the cycle. He has become a secluded and resentful man who lashes out at his friends because of the pain the world has brought him. He trusts no one and helps no one outside of selfish gain. He is Joel's future, if not for the love Joel learns to give Ellie. His story is one of tragedy and loss. His partner, having been bitten, decided to hang himself, and the player is privy to Bill's pain. Losing a loved one has many effects. We explored them in the last video of Gree. Bill has shut off. He is experiencing denial. He's entered autopilot and cares for nothing because care can get him nothing but more pain. The game has spent minimal time up until now actually building the relationship between Ellie and Joel, but we get our first real parent-child moment here, after Bill helps them escape. It's adorable, and I can't help but smile at conked-out Ellie. She reminds me of myself on road trips, swearing that I would never go to sleep, but immediately passing out the minute I had the chance. We continue with the duo's adventure, and meet another pair of travelers along the way. Sam and Henry, the pair of brothers who help Joel and Ellie escape from a tank, are another tale of heartbreak and pain. Sam and Ellie's conversation about fear is something I held on to up until the end of the second game. And it's all because of what Ellie says.
Let's see. Scorpions are pretty creepy. Being by myself. I'm scared of ending up alone.
The fear of being alone is something I can empathize with deeply. I genuinely believe this is the most common fear humans have, and I myself am deathly afraid of being alone. The morning after their discussion is the most jolting scene yet. Suicide. The next cost of the cycle of violence. Henry's death is shocking and painful and scary, and fuck, I cry every time I see it. It's a reflection of the terrible things pain can do to someone. Henry gives up, and I can understand why. Everyone has someone that, if they lost them, they might not be able to go on.
Means we're close to Jackson City, right?
He gives in, and the gun is his escape. The game wants you to feel how much the cycle hurts people, and when that shot fires, feels like I've been shot right in the chest. The journey continues. I feel weak. My breath is gone. I put the game down at this point. It was shell-shockingly painful, and I needed a break when I played it. My eyes brimming with tears, I stumble through the next portion of the game, almost mindlessly, as I attempt to wrap my head around the loss that I've just endured. The scene in the car has set up the caring between Joel and Ellie, and the payoff is now. With Ellie's little runaway stunt, I begin to see not only how much she cares for Joel, but how much he reciprocates that care.
What loss is.
She so desperately doesn't want Joel to abandon her.
Has either died.
The power in Ellie's voice for this line, everyone except for fucking you, is her last-ditch effort to make him stay. And he does, and it is such a good payoff. It's the first mildly rewarding event in the game, and it makes me go, thank God. The relationship has been solidified between Joel and Ellie because he chose to protect her, instead of being selfish and choosing the easy way out. Remember how I said Joel's selfish nature is only redeemed by the people he cares about? Here it is again. It's the majestic way this game and its sequel weave together themes that make them true masterpieces. To build this relationship, the game pushes the pair through hardship after hardship, binding them together because everyone else around them has been lost. The near death of Joel, the capture and torture of Ellie, these events show how much the characters care for their counterpart and strengthens the bond between them. And I'm fully on board with this form of relationship building. This is a third aspect of the cycle of violence: attachment. Through pain, the relationship and dependency is built. And while this seems like a good thing, and I think to an extent it is, this love can result in the other two potentials of the cycle. The relationships of Henry and of Bill both cause them to experience deep pain. One closed off completely, the other committed suicide. Both of these happened because of their attachment. And it's this attachment that keeps the cycle going. It's the love that makes the attachment seem worth it. And it brings about the final choice, Joel's choice, that makes the whole world come crashing down. Let's discuss the infamous ending and its difficult morality. Often, when discussing ethics, the train conundrum takes center stage. If you don't know what this is, here's the premise. A train is barreling down the tracks and headed straight for your best friend who is tied to them. However, you spot a lever that would divert the train onto another track. The issue is, on the other track, there are 5 people bound. You don't know these people. They're complete strangers, but there are 5 of them. The moral dilemma asks, what choice do you make? Kill the 5 people you don't know, or kill your one friend? It's been hotly debated for decades, with various answers given and other pieces of the puzzle questioned. Are you a murderer if you flip the switch? Does inaction make you a killer anyways? And can you escape innocently from this dilemma? But Joel answers this question in the less chosen way. Where most people would save the 5, he chooses to kill them to save Ellie. It is, of course, metaphorical. In reality, Joel chooses to kill the Fireflies to save Ellie's life. Her life which would have been taken to save the world. When players reached this story beat back in 2013, it was totally shocking. Never had the end of a game been so morally ambiguous, almost turning the hero into the villain, depending on which faction of the moral war you reside on. And there hasn't been such a morally difficult ending in a game since.
You know that, right?
Did Joel make the right choice?
What's the other option?
Certainly not to Ellie.
Back to Tommy's.
She wanted her life, their journey, to mean something. In the most beautifully hopeful scene in the game, Joel asks her whether she would give up the quest
Everything that I've done.
and live with him. But like she says,
It can't be for nothing.
but Joel makes the selfish choice anyways. It's a perfect demonstration of how their relationship has evolved. He won't give her up. He will not fail to save his daughter again. Ellie has occupied that Sarah-shaped hole in Joel's heart, and now that it's filled, he will never let it be empty again.
With BBs.
They say that having a child is like having your heart walk outside your body. For Joel, his heart was torn, ripped out, but he found it again in Ellie. When they walk through the woods after the final moments, Joel tells Ellie that she and Sarah would have been friends, and I genuinely believe they would have. It's heartwarming, and it feels like a conclusion to the saga. Until Ellie asks Joel the ultimate question.
Swear to me that everything that you said about the Fireflies is true.
I swear.
Okay.
It's that okay. The way Ellie says it, uncertain and ambiguous, as if she doesn't truly believe what he says. And that feeling, that lingering feeling of uncertainty, makes way for The Last of Us Part 2. Hey, I'm glad you watched all the way through. There are 2 games in this series, and I'm making a video on each one, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss Part 2, where I delve into the depth of each character in the sequel. If you enjoyed, drop a like. It's such a good favor to me, and maybe even leave a comment telling me which part of my analysis was the best. I've left the link to my Discord down in the description below, so you can join there and come hang out with me. I'm happy to get on and talk to you anytime. Thank you so much for watching, and good night.